Hello, everyone. This is Marcel calling you from Germany, actually. And I'm very happy that you are with me this evening, this afternoon, wherever you are, because today our topic is GLM. And some of you might know that this is one of my favorite topics, because actually this was, I think, the start of my way on somehow feeling part of the Genelec family, because I worked at the German distributor Audio Pro at that time. And I did the first somehow German version of a walkthrough video for GLM. I think, if I remember correctly, it was 2 or 3. And and this was also the first time I then was in contact with R&D quite a lot, because I just was interested in stuff and wanted to find out what features could be added, or actually also how some features work in detail. So this is, I think, for me, it was always a fascinating topic, and I hope it's fascinating for you as well. Otherwise, you would not be here. And I'm trying my very best that you can enjoy the next 60, 70 minutes probably, when we just talk about GLM. We'll focus on some new features of GLM 5.2. It's not that many, and therefore I will also just give you some basic workflow tips, and also I think some tips about evaluating your system, because I think this is what's one of the main advantages of GLM, that you can really dig deep into the room acoustics, system placement, and to make it possible for you to get your own sonic reference, as we call it, that is just more reliable, and that ensures that, for example, your mixes translate well to other systems. And of course, PowerPoint is with us as well, always just sitting next to me. And thank you, Lucas, for bringing it up. And we'll now start just going through a few slides. And this fantastic logo, hopefully every one of you already has seen. This is just the starting screen of GLM 5. If not, please update your system and use the latest version. This is the guy talking to you, and nothing I think that has to be said here, because a lot of you already know me. Otherwise, you will just get in touch with me at some point, because if you have any questions about GLM, about grade, and send these to support@genelec.com. It could be me that is replying. We have a bigger team of some guys, and all of them are doing an excellent job. But if it's about GLM in detail, then sometimes my name will pop up in your email account. Today, you can not only contact us via email, you can also use the comment section on the platform you're watching now. And please just enter your questions at any time, and in the end, we'll just go through them. And I will do my very best to reply to them. Otherwise, I will do my very best to reply to your questions later on, and you will receive an email then. Just to summarize from my point of view what GLM is, so the so-called Genelec loudspeaker manager lets you evaluate the performance of your speaker setup in your specific room. So this is step 1, which is very important. Of course, usually we talk about room adaptation first, but for me, the first step is that you can evaluate what's happening. And then we have the second step, that it offers you, of course, excellent tools for room adaptation. It's also a flexible monitor controller. Hopefully, some of you already found that out, which also can be, used with things like our 9320 reference controller, or, for example, a Stream Deck, just using MIDI to use all of these really useful functions like mute, dim, that you can just switch groups, that you can have level presets, all of these things that usually are part of a monitor controller design. And what's important, of course, that the needed DSPs are always built into the devices, in our SAM devices, Smart Active Monitoring. So unfortunately, you need SAM stuff to use GLM, because otherwise the nice settings that GLM and AutoCal are calculating will just end up nowhere, because there would be no DSPs. So it's not possible to use this, with other analog third-party speakers. As mentioned, I would like to start with some new features of GLM 5.2. First of all, where do you find it? I think some of you are already used to it. Nowadays, everything can be found under My Genelec. So you will have to create an account there. It's absolutely recommended because you can also then register your speakers, for example, for the 5-year warranty, so the extended warranty period. And it's also very easy, for example, then to find your grade reports there, and just, it's a really good hub for, finding all the stuff you usually need. And so you will just have to log in to your account and then go to Junior Software and Services, click on GLM, and then you can find the 2 installers, one for Mac, one for Windows. Mac, of course, also supports all Silicon Macs, so the M series Macs. And just download it, install it. You can easily just, install it on top of your old GLM installation. It will not overwrite your settings. These will still stay in an own folder, and you, of course, have access to that. And later on, I will also show you where we store what, because this also can sometimes cause a little confusion if you think about what is a SAM file, what are groups, and how are they connected. So first new feature for GLM 5.2 was the complete integration of our PRM sets. PRM is a bundle just out of 9320A. This is the reference controller that can be used as, of course, a remote control for GLM, but also as an interface. You can, for example, just output digital IS/EBU audio and inputting stuff from your computer via USB-C. And this is combined with our 8550 headphones. And these 8550 headphones are designed to give you a really neutral basis, so really very similar thinking like we do with our speakers, to give you a linear neutral basis to experience audio on headphones. And for example, also experience binauralized audio on headphones if you use Oral ID, which makes it possible that you can have multi-channel audio with externalization on headphones. And to make these headphones even more linear and even more neutral, we calibrate all of them. So we have a nice small machinery that just exactly measures every single specific headphone. And we get a curve out of that. And we can have a correction EQ curve to use that in the 9320 to have an even better, linear starting point. You can compare it with our microphones we deliver with the GLM kit, and of course also the 9320. And these microphones also are calibrated in factory. And when you start calibrating in GLM, you can enter the serial number of the microphone. And then we can just make sure that we load this calibration data and that the results are even more precise. And you enter this in the 9320, so if you have it set up in GLM, you just click on it, click on settings, and then in the top third, you see the selected equalizer section. And there you can then, first of all, select the type of cushions you're using, for example, leather or velvet, because they really are a little different if it comes to, how, let's put it like this, for example, how the low frequencies are reproduced. The velvet, for example, is just a little more open compared to the leather, which is really very well sealed. I was looking for the word sealed. Now I found it, and this makes a difference in the equalizer setting. And we also have cable on left, cable on right side. This is not that easy to detect, but it also makes a difference if somehow this thing is completely sealed when you have the mini jack inserted to the complete ear cup. And therefore, there are also these two settings. And then right to it is serial. This is just where you put in your personal serial number from your 9320, and then you are absolutely ready to go. If you buy this as a bundle, usually the serial number, of course, is already inserted. But some of you might know that if you bought a 9320 in the past, it's now possible to get an 8550 in addition. And then you will have to enter this serial. What's also related to the headphone is that we now have the settings somehow attached to each group. Before that, it was global, and I think it's way easier now that you can just have, for example, one group set up with an EQ setting. For example, here I reduced 150 hertz slightly, and when I switch to another group, I can have a different EQ setting. So all of this is always stored in the group data. What's really handy and what I really like, although it looks like a small change, that we have the possibility now to have a slightly higher crossover frequency for subwoofers. You might know that in the past it was 100 hertz. And actually, of course, this usually makes perfect sense, because if you go higher, the subwoofer is localized. So you can localize the subwoofer. So it can happen. If the subwoofer is not really placed in the middle of your setup, which can make sense for acoustical reasons, that you would try, or you would just localize, for example, a kick drum, then coming more from the subwoofer compared to, where your regular stereo imaging is happening. And therefore, of course, usually it makes sense to have lower crossovers. Or you have two subwoofers and place them left and right. This is another option. But sometimes, we will see this later on, there are these really, really, I would call them, really mean notches at around 100 hertz, caused by usually the floor. And if there is one of these notches at around 100 hertz, these 20 hertz higher can really help to get this covered by the subwoofer in a better way. And this was, for example, one of the things I just asked for, and R&D made some, experiments and try to find a good compromise. And I was hoping for even higher, but 120 I think is a good starting point. So you only need that if you have, as said, these notches around 100. Otherwise, just stay with our standard setting like 85 or even lower. And if you use stereo subwoofers, so one on the left, one on the right, also reproducing only left and right content, then of course it can make perfect sense also to go higher if you like to, because then the localization is almost identical with the speaker, and then it's not critical. There's one new thing that some of you might think, yeah, well, cool, that's really fantastic, thank you. Great report is no longer free. I try to, have it in the, I try to explain it to you. Some of you who know me know that I'm also a huge fan of the Great Report, and therefore I think, I'm only talking personally now, it could have been free, if you ask me. But there are, of course, absolute clear reasons why we changed that. For example, the amount of R&D work that just has, flown into this project during the years, and still there is R&D, of course, working on it to improve it, to make it even better, to give us new options, new features. And being now not only, the enthusiastic audio guy, but also someone who's just thinking about business, this makes, of course, perfect sense. And I have to outline, and I have to make sure that everyone knows about that. Of course, you still get 12 reports for free. And to be honest, usually 12 reports is perfectly fine, to make all of your basic adjustments. And if you're really struggling with that, for example, also if you are working, I would say, with students or someone, I don't know, where you just do this on a regular basis and you would need more, please just contact us. So this is, of course, no problem to discuss this. There's one really bad thing that should never happen, that people don't use Great because they think, oh no, then I will lose one. So only 11 left and only 10 left. Don't do that. Yeah. So this is really, it's so such a powerful tool. Just make use of it. And you can see the pricing. It's already, I would say, absolutely fair. If you need more, you can go for example, 6 more reports. It's around 30 euros. Calculate that, in relation to that, for example, you would have to do this all on your own. You would really need someone that can give you a deeper insight. So you really get really value for money here. This is related to what I already told you, because we now store a lot of settings in the group preset. This is also indicated. So this is happening with 9320, for example, that you can just get an information. You make an adjustment, for example, headphones level or headphones EQ. The moment you close the window, you will see this window it's now stored to the group. Just that you are aware of it's group related and not something that is, globally valid. And if you use the traditional GLM network adapter and the GLM kit, then you just get, this basic information that it's stored to the group setting. And I mentioned that what is stored where. I also was struggling with that in the beginning when I was trying to understand, where all of these files you see was referring me to had been somehow, positioned on my computer. So if you once get it, it's relatively easy, but I will explain it to you. So we have one main folder, and this is under users, documents. So this is exactly the same on Mac and on PC. And then it's called Genelec, obvious reason. And GLM 5, GLM 4, whatever you have. This is why I told you can easily install it on top of other things, because you will always keep these folders. And if you then look into the GLM 5 folder, for example, now, you see setup files. And if you hear some strange noises from the outside, my daughter just decided, to play directly in front of my door, but hey, that's fine. She already listened to her first sweeps last week. She was not liking it. She's more into music. But I told her, Marlene, sweeps are the basic, of good music. So get used to it. So in the setup files folder, you see at the moment a file that is called webinar demo.sam. And SAM is somehow the main file we use for GLM. This is the only file actually that contains all of the rest that is used for GLM. But it does not contain, for example, information regarding the sweeps. And this is sometimes confusing for people. This is why we always ask you to use, for example, the export setup to desktop function of GLM to export your setup if you want to send it to us, or just go for help and then services help, and then you can just have this checkbox include a setup file when you contact us and drop us a message. Because if you only send us the SAM file, we can open it and we can, of course, read out a few things, but we don't get the complete, picture of your setup. And therefore, you see in the setup files folder, we have the port.sam file, and we have a folder that has exactly the same name, like, the .sam, only with this underscore. I think this is, in English, must be underscore in front of it. And if you look into this folder, then you can see we have groups. So for example, I had a preset SAM file with 3 groups. And now you see group 1, group 2, group 3. If you click on one of these groups, you can see, there we have finally WAV files. And what is this? The WAV files are just the recordings of the sweeps. So every speaker, as you know, plays back a sweep during the calibration process. And these sweeps are recorded by the microphone, and they are here in this folder. And this is somehow the secret source of everything we do with Grade or everything we do with AutoCal. So basically, we send these 2 WAV files to our server, and then AutoCal starts analyzing it and starts to make the calculations for the filters, and then the information is sent back to you. And this is also what you see with these 2 JSON files. One is called to AutoCal and one is called to GLM. So this is just for the communication between server and your local machine. And the AutoCal levels text, to be honest, it's just showing the levels of the speakers. I'm not really sure where this is used, but I could ask. But everyone who just wants to listen, for example, to his sweeps, the recorded sweeps, then just go to these group folders. Most of you might know that GLM always just, uses autosave. So it's always stored directly in the background. You don't have to go to save files. This is useful because, for example, if there would be a crash or something, of course, you don't lose anything. But sometimes if you want to try out something, it also can be confusing, to be honest, because then you just realize, okay, it's already stored, although I was just playing around with it. And if you have this issue, just create another group. So just go for group preset, duplicate, and make your adjustments, for example, in this group. This is easier, and then you can always just switch back. And we had very, very rare amount of cases where people got a corrupted file for whatever. This can be just a power shortage or something like that, or the computer is just having an issue with writing the file. And therefore, I highly recommend, if you really, you are a huge fan of your setup file, then just store it to the cloud as well. So if you go for file and then save to cloud, you can store up to 3 SAM files there, with which of course can include all of your groups. There is a limitation in size, but we recently increased it. It only can become an issue for people with these huge immersive setups, so 916 and even bigger, and then a lot of groups in it, and this just will give you a lot of WAV files, a lot of them, and therefore the space might become a limitation. And of course you can also open from cloud, and if these 3 are just you already used them, you have the option to delete one, and before it's deleted there's one checkbox, and you can just say, please download the file to my local machine before it's deleted, and then it's really very easy. And usually I say, don't be afraid. You can of course do a new calibration at any time. If you still have your microphone with you, it's of course no issue at all. But of course, if you tweaked it a lot with a sound character profiler and things like that, then sometimes it's just more convenient that it's still with you. And therefore, just use the cloud. And this is only a naming thing. If you had become used to group preset and store to loudspeakers, now it's store into Genelec devices. This is just because something like the 9320, of course, is not a speaker. And there are also things like 9401 and 9301. 9301. So devices are included now. This was basically, the main new stuff. I would just now like to focus on a few things that we get asked quite often, because it's not that obvious. And one of these things is ISS settings. So you might know ISS basically is a very cool feature, because it makes it possible that if there is no audio going to the speaker, after a defined period of time, it will just fall into standby mode. And then it's very sustainable then. It does not consume that much power anymore. And the moment audio is sent again to the speaker, it wakes up. This is how ISS basically should work. Sometimes it can be challenging. For example, if you have some kind of a noise on your cabling. And therefore, we introduced also ISS sensitivity, and this sensitivity settings, high, medium, low, sometimes are also confusing. And therefore, we try to make it easy. If you have your mouse on this sensitivity area, you will see this text I have now in the PowerPoint, and this shows you what it means. So a high sensitivity means that very low signals, for example, minus 75 dBU already will wake up the speaker. Medium is minus 68, and low is minus 61. So if sensitivity is low, you need a higher signal to get the speaker, back to life. Therefore, for example, if there is some noise on your cable and you have the problem that it's just, the speaker wakes up although you did not hit play, then of course you can just go for low to compensate for that. And it's very easy to get confused with one thing. This is usually made for analog signals. The problem with digital signals is as easy as that. Unfortunately, you cannot really tell the difference. Is it audio that is sent digitally to your speaker, or is it the clocking? And therefore, a lot of people ask me, hey, Marcel, I just stopped my playback now for half an hour. I defined 10 minutes and the speaker is still on. If your streamer or interface or anything you are using is still sending the clocking signal, the speaker will not go to sleep. That's just the problem of, once again, physics. So ideally, for example, if you're a home user and you have a streamer, turn off the streamer completely, and then this problem is solved. Otherwise, there's only the option that if you have GLM running, then you can of course use the power button in GLM. And we also made it possible that, I will just have this, I think, 2 slides after that you can use ISS with GLM as well. So it acts like ISS. It's a little different, I'll tell you. And also something that is sometimes a little unclear, the input selection is by default automatic, and this means digital somehow first. So if there is a digital signal detected at the input of the speaker, it will always use the digital input in standalone mode. In GLM, as you know, you define a group. This one is a group that is digital. Another group is the group that is defined analog. And of course, it will only switch if you switch groups. But in this standalone mode, where you have stored your settings, for example, from the calibration, you have this option that automatic means it will switch to your streamer, for example. If you turn off your streamer and you have, for example, I don't know, a TV setup on the analog inputs, it will switch to these automatically. If you don't want to use this automatic option, then just select one of these and store it permanently to the speakers. And this is just to sum it up. This is how the complete store group settings to the Genelec devices, how it's called now, dialog looks like. Be aware of that you have your startup level, and the startup level is the level somehow the speaker wakes up when you are in standalone mode. So you start your settings and then you disconnect, for example, the RJ45 cables, or you disconnect only your interface from the computer. This is all, indicating that now standalone mode is used, and then the startup level is used. So for example, if you go for -60 and you have an analog setup, this will be usually way too low. So with most of the regular, also home devices for analog setups, you can easily go to -10 or even 0, to be honest, to have a good, range for the volume knob. And I would always try this out while GLM is running. So play around with your source, check, what levels you want to listen at and at what position you are at that moment. And then just adjust the level in GLM that it matches the somehow output level of your source, and then use this value for startup level. And the maximum level restriction is something you can have on top. For example, if you use, our wired volume controller, the 9310, and then it's, for example, possible that you start with -60, so, safety children mode. And then if you turn up the volume knob, you can have a second layer of safety that even then, for example, Marlene is not able to go higher than -20, or better -30 if it's digital. So these are the two layers. And of course, sometimes it happens that people just have a maximum level restriction is set lower than startup. And of course, this is then not working. Then you will get an information that please change that. That's not possible. And on the right side, sometimes, not really, recognized by some people. If you don't want to hold the power button for 10 seconds, this is the regular way of resetting a speaker to the, factory settings. You can also do it here. So this is just also possible. Just click on factory reset and then this is done. And what's cool is it will, of course, still use the settings you are currently using in GLM. So this will not be gone. You might have realized when GLM is running, you have the settings and everything is plugged in. It will always use these settings. So the factory reset only would become somehow active if you then also go to standalone. So if you just then turn speakers off, unplug GLM or the network, and then the speakers are resetted. Exactly. Talking about safety, this is also something I was really asking for a lot of times. We are always doing our very, very best that it's almost impossible to get digital full level output. But there are situations where it's really complex to know what could happen. And for example, one situation was always during calibration, because when we, as you know, we have our own sweeps generated from the speakers, and therefore somehow the speakers are at full sensitivity to just output that at the regular level. And we had been luckily only, I think, 1 or 2 cases where then, for example, someone was playing at the same time digital audio to the speakers during the calibration. And it was only a very, very short period of time where it was audible, but then you can imagine it was loud. And therefore, we have already optimized that. So it cannot happen. But still, we have this nice dialog box that the moment audio is detected and you want to start doing a calibration, GLM will just tell you, hey, please turn off your audio. So stop your streamer or just, stop Spotify Tidal, whatever you are using, until the calibration is done. And this is just another safety layer that makes life easier. There's one topic that is more or less only interesting for 9320 users, but probably we have a few of them watching, so I will just quickly cover that. Some of you might have seen that a group is yellow and then it's just muted. So I already got this question. I think it was already today, once again, that someone told me, he connected his speakers and he wanted to use the 9320 in standalone mode, and there's no audio. Absolutely no audio. And the background is this one. The problem is the speakers are showing a green LED. So everything looks perfectly normal, but it's muted within the signal processing. And it's muted for this reason. If you have SAM monitors connected to the 9320, so also with, of course, RG45 cables. So GLM does see it as a SAM monitor. 9320 knows about it. And you have the following issue, that you might know the master level control. This is something only doable with 9320. If you click on it in group preset edit mode or also in settings, and then you can have two modes. And one of them is GLM fixed, and the other one is called adjustable. And as you can see in this screenshot, adjustable is used, which makes, for example, perfect sense if you use this standalone, because then the 9320 itself will change the volume. Yeah? And GLM fixed means the 9320 sends out at full level and it's reduced at the last stage in the speakers. So how we usually recommend it. So this is how GLM is doing it. You send from your source, and then you have the large volume fader of GLM, and this is just happening after the complete processing. So this is just for all of you who are really, also audio nerds. But of course, technically there is a difference. Yeah, if you have a signal that is already reduced by 40 dB or 30 dB, and it's fed into the speakers, of course, the resolution of the DSPs, of the filters, is lower compared to a signal that is at full level, which highest resolution. So all of our DSPs are used with highest resolution. And then in the end, you bring it down. And this is the reason why somehow GLM is forcing you to set groups to GLM fixed if it's a SAM monitor. This is just the reason. And if this is not applied. So if you use adjustable, you will just get, these nice yellow group marking on the right side. And that's the explanation. So we also try to explain it, but it's confusing. I can completely understand why some people are struggling with that, because you don't think about it usually, that you have two layers, where you adjust the volume. Usually you just think I have this nice knob in the middle and this is doing the stuff. But of course, this is a complete digital device and it's only sending data. And it depends on if the data is already applied to the outputs of the device or if this data is just sent to the speakers. And so if you see a yellow-orange group, you can absolutely be sure it's solved within 30 seconds. There are still people who need GLM without internet connection, which is really hard, I can tell you. But I know about that. Broadcasters, sometimes universities, and some of them just don't allow any, internet access. Usually it's the best way that you just use your mobile phone to make your personal hotspot and use this one. But if it's really not possible, you can still download the so-called local AutoCal. And this is just, below the installer's in my Genelec. So you have 5.2, and then on the next section you can find this local AutoCal install. Local AutoCal is really the old AutoCal 1, so this was before version 4.1. And of course, for the calibration results, this is still fine. But it, of course, does not support newer technologies like, for example, WooferCal, what you need for W371 or 8381. And there's only also one downside. On GLM 5, you cannot use it with Silicon Macs. So it's only working with Intel Macs. If you have a Silicon Mac, if you want to do that, you can still do it with GLM 422 and this packaging. Yeah. And you also have to be aware of that you need the calibration file for your microphone. So ideally, you should just enter the serial and do a fake calibration before you go to your location when you still have internet, and then it's downloaded. Otherwise, you can always contact us and we can send you your specific microphone calibration file, and then you only have to copy it into the folder we talked about. There's also a folder then for mic calibration. Well, this was around half an hour. Cool. Once again, if you have questions, type them in. This is the only downside of these live webinars, because it's still a webinar, and I'm just looking at myself in this nice small screen on the camera, and not that much interaction. So I just thought a few times. Sometimes I try to make some jokes, and usually if you are with students, you get some feedback. And if really all of them are all just looking at you, what is this? You just stop doing it. Unfortunately, I don't see how you are, looking at me, and then you have to accept the way of presentation. So let's go for some practical tips. If I'm evaluating systems, and if I really start, for example, from the scratch, for example, I'm in a new room and I really would like to figure out, where should I place what, then it can be pretty handy to not calibrate and sweep the complete setup, especially, for example, with immersive stuff. It can be just perfectly enough to sweep one speaker all the time. If you already have set up the complete thing, which sometimes happens, you can easily just then change your layout, or I would say change the group, by going to Group Preset Edit, and then just click on the speaker you want to mute, for example, so you don't want to use in this calibration setting, and just change the group status to off. So for some people, very obvious. Others think, oh, it's interesting. Yeah. So this is easier than, for example, to go to edit layout and then drag it, to not used, especially if the setup is already configured and you just want to change something. Just use it. Yeah. So Group Preset Edit, and then click on the speaker icon, and group status has to be changed. By the way, this is also where you can change digital input A or B, if this might be an issue for you at some point. Usually, if you place speakers on the left side, they get the flag A. If you place speakers on the right side, they have always B, which is correct. But here you can also change it. For example, if you use subwoofers in stereo, subwoofers usually get A and B, because they just sum up both channels. And if you have a stereo setup with subs, then of course you can make sure, or you should make sure, that left sub only plays A, right sub only B. Also done here. Yeah, and then I try and try and look at the results. So this is actually something I just did for fun today in my small room, which is only, I always thought it's larger, but it's only 10.5 square meters. So it's really, really small. Yeah. And and I will just show you, this is, for example, my first measurement I did. And I will also tell you why it looks a little strange, because I wanted it to look strange. But I think you agree, everything's perfectly fine in the mid frequencies and in the high frequencies. So there's really nothing to complain about. But in the bass, we have serious issues. So start with the most obvious one. This is here on the right speaker, that we have a huge notch at around 90, 80, 70. This is 60 hertz. Yeah, so 60 hertz is completely gone. It's lower than -20. And the left side, because this is really not symmetrical, this room is special. Yeah? It's very special. It also has not a regular height. It has this fantastic Dachschräge, as it's called in Germany. So there are a lot of complex things happening here. And you see, this is really funny because it's just overall, it's a notch, but you have some things that go up. So, and as you know, that we usually are not recommending positive gain, especially I don't recommend positive gain, because for most cases, it doesn't make any sense because it's a destructive reflection, and this just is not a good idea to treat that with positive gain. Because, for example, think about it, we would need plus 20 dB here to bring that up. Plus 20 dB at 60 hertz will just immediately give you the red LED all the time. And at other parts of the room, you can imagine what it means if you have plus 20 and 60 hertz. So this is mad. And AutoCal is just programmed to do a little adjustment for the tonality, and it helps sometimes by 4 or 5 dBs here. But of course, you see this is still not really good. So the green curve is far from acceptable in that range. And this is also something, of course, you could listen to music here. This is not an issue, but it's relatively wide, and it's too low in my opinion. So this is what I spoke about now in a green box. What was the reason for that, especially for this really deep notch at 60 hertz? This was very easy to explain. This was caused by a modal influence. So modal influences, that are the evil villain of everyone doing audio. Problem is they always win in the end. But there are really nice tools to calculate these modal influences just by typing in a room mode calculator, and usually you end up very soon by MROC from Acoustics. This is Andreas Melcher from Vienna. For years, he's doing really fantastic tools, and it's really just nice to visualize the things. And for example, this one is also cool. You might see I have selected the 62 hertz here. This was exactly where the cancellation happened. And if you go to these modes, you can also, of course, see this piano thing in the background, and the software will play that frequency. And this is really nice because then you can get the 60 hertz, and I walk exactly to the spot where the microphone was standing, and I realized, okay, there's almost nothing, which is still fascinating because you think there's so much energy in the room, and still you have then spots with nulls where there is nothing. And he's also showing you with these, nice colored surfaces where the maximum, the maximas, so the maximum sound pressure is. And of course, in between, there's a null, a zero. Nothing. And I just placed the microphone exactly in the middle of this room axis to get a really bad result to start with. This was the idea. So, but if you see things like that, then it's very well. It's worth checking the modal influences first. This is just interesting to see, because in that case, it just meant that the listening position was wrong. I had the speakers always on the wall already, so you know that we recommend that for obvious reasons, to just get rid of these back wall reflection problems. And it was just the listening position that was not good. Never sit exactly in the middle of the room. And the other thing that I spoke about in the past, I think several times, but I think it's worth mentioning again, is that you can look at things from the SBIR perspective. This is speaker boundary interference response. If you just mention that anywhere, some people will just turn around and go away. It's also not a good idea for Tinder dates to start with that. But people who are interested in room acoustics and physics, they will just think, hey, you're really a serious guy. And this just means the calculation of destructive reflection somehow. So the easiest example is always you have a speaker. It's 1 meter away from the wall behind the speaker. Then you have direct sound to you, and because bass is omnidirectional. It's also going to the back wall, it's reflected, and then you have just, it's a different path of sound, and they are no longer in phase. That's the problem. And if the distance of the speaker to the wall is a quarter wavelength, then it will cancel out completely. Because quarter wavelength in one way, quarter wavelength back to the speaker is half of a wavelength, and this is complete cancellation. And this is what is calculated with these SBIRs. And what Mr. Tripp from Australia, I think he's also one of the complete enthusiasts, like Andreas, he made a wonderful calculator because you can actually enter everything. So where is my speaker? What is the height of my speaker? Even the baffle size. And you will then just get a really nice and easy way to look at. For example, here's the famous 103 hertz as a null, which usually is always happening because of the floor. And it just helps because you then know what's causing the issue. And I can already tell you it's always a compromise. So it's really hard to get the perfect results. But sometimes it's really easy, or it's quite easy to eliminate some of them. This is the good starting point. One of our leading R&D guys also told me once, it's pretty frustrating, Marcel, being an R&D engineer, building speakers and designing speakers. You solve one problem, you have the next one the next day. So it's really like that. It's always a compromise. Yeah. And now please look on the right side. On the left side, you see my first measurement. This was Marcel sitting in the middle of the room. And then Marcel just moved to the front third of the room. Exactly the same speakers, exactly the same measurement environment, of course. And you see this is way better. So we still see that Mr. Schechter has a really huge modal influences. So look at the speaker here. At 130 hertz, it's also around plus 20. But this is just if you don't have bass traps and if this is just a regular room and not a studio. And but although I now have this issue here, as you can see, with 90 hertz is also almost minus 10, it's not that wide anymore. So you see, it's, of course, still this speaker is a little critical. It's just not that easy to treat like the left one, for obvious reasons, because this is somehow more in the corner, and this corner is special. So it's like it's hard to describe. It's complex, but I think you will completely agree with me that this is a better basis. And then I did another thing, and I thought about, okay, I can live with that now. That's fine. Now I should add some treatment. So for your measurement, pleasure, I removed all of these very simple absorbers this morning, and then I made one measurement without these absorbers and one measurement with absorbers. And this is the result from GLM. Yeah, and this is why we have great. Because actually you don't see anything. And this is what's very important to understand. Frequency response is one way to look at things, and it's a perfect starting point, and it can tell you a lot about the basic linearity and neutrality of your sound. But it does not reflect really, for example, how reverberant a room is, or with what decays you are struggling. For example, that the bass frequencies ring way longer than high frequencies. If you look at these two things, I could not tell you really. I couldn't tell you what is the treated one. Of course, for obvious reasons, there are no bass traps here in my small room, so it makes it even harder. Otherwise, the red curve would have changed more, because we just would have had an effect. But since these absorbers here, they are 10 centimeters thick, usually they work around 400, 500 maximum and not lower. And therefore, you see there is no difference. And that's the reason why you should use Great. And why I always talk about it, and I'm a huge fan of it. Because it's easy to order. Just go to Services, Great Report Order, after you are logged in to your My Genelec account, and enter your room dimensions. By the way, this is also important to know. These dimensions don't change the calibration at all, because as you know, we do filterings, and these filters are just set because of the recordings from the sweeps. So there is no relation to the dimensions. The room dimensions are only used for the last chapter of the grade report, where we somehow can tell you if you, for example, are a studio, then you should be within this corridor. If your room is, for example, like mine now, 27 cubic meters. But for example, if you want to also know about these more studio-related details, then it makes sense to measure your room. For me, it's already hard because it's like often it's always a rectangular room. This is the basic setup. Only AMROC room mode can also do more complex rooms at the moment. I also then had to go for, this is somehow the medium height of my room, the 2.60. I have a height of almost 3 meters and I have a height of 2 meters, and then I had to go for something in between. And you will now see the grade reports from these two measurements. So left side is always no treatment and right side is with treatment. And really only, these 10 centimeter panels, 10 of them. And you can already see that although this might look just like, a funny, very colored graph thing. Early versus late is one of the first things I always look at because it shows you somehow the relation between direct sound, which is the green curve, and late sound, so which is 20 milliseconds later than the direct sound. So it just is a good estimation for the diffuse sound field. So what is coming to you from the reflections, and from the room itself. And if you want to do critical listening, so if you want to make decisions, if you want to mix, if you want to just master, and I don't get me wrong, but not only listening to music, because to be honest, in a living room, the thing you see on the left side would work perfectly fine. You would still have a wonderful audio. What I'm talking about now are these critical listening approaches. And if it's then possible for you with some absorbers, for example, in the living room, I could also have used just, nice photos that are printed on top of these 10 centimeter layers. And then you just get a clear difference between direct sound and late sound, which is this corridor I marked here on the right side. So for example, this is more than 10 dBs, which is just really nice. It just lets you separate direct sound from diffuse sound in a very easy way. And on the right side, you see it's sometimes almost on the same level. I also have seen living rooms with a lot of windows and stuff where actually late sound was higher than direct sound, because it was the perfect echo chamber somehow. And this is the next section I look at. This is the RT60 time, so somehow shown as a corridor. So the decay time is usually, of course, longer in the bass. This is why we have the corridor somehow more opening to higher decays on the left side, and it's more strict in here. And this is only a small difference now, for example, between the room without my absorbers. You see this green corridor and the complete blue curve. This is the measured one, just moves slightly. And if you look at the numbers, it's approximately it's from 0.37 to 0.28. But still, this is something, really, believe me. And in addition, for example, these panels made it possible that the flutter echo was gone. Flutter echo is what happens if you just clap into your hands and you get this thing happening in the room. And the third thing I always look at is waterfall. And waterfall also looks absolutely incredible in the beginning, and you think, okay, yeah, let's just listen to some Pink Floyd music and smoke something and then float into this stuff. But actually, it's a useful physical tool only. And it shows you the frequencies. These are the bass frequencies, 10 hertz up to 10 kilohertz in that case. It shows you the amplitude, for example, similar to what you have seen. This is the measured frequency response, the red curve we see in GLM. But then the added layer is this section here on the Z-axis. So you have now a time window. For example, this is defined to be 500 milliseconds. And just shows, for example, that these two frequencies here ring almost half of a second. And others, for example, the high frequencies are approximately at 250 milliseconds. And if you look closely, you can see that, for example, here, of course, nothing changed here. This is exactly the same because absorbers don't do anything there. But the complete range up here, so from 500 approximately, is just shorter. Yeah, you can just see that it's just shorter by approximately, I don't know, 100 to 150 milliseconds. And this is a special I give to you because this shows the use of some active bass traps. Some of you might know that these exist. And it was just a check we made to find out what's actually happening. And you see this room is already very well done above 100, but we see some clear modal influences here in the bass. So it's just slightly longer, of course, as you see. And if you now only look at this was really interesting. So these bass traps, these active bass traps, had been very efficient at around 30 hertz, which usually is very, very low. If you want to have passive stuff, then you really need huge elements. And this was interesting to see because although it's just this reduction here, you see, this is clearly audible. So this can clearly help you, especially if you listen to more bass-heavy tracks. So this is really, really useful. You can also see it here. 32 hertz was 0.7 almost, and here it's 0.5. So, of course, it's always up to discussion if you have to spend that much money for 0.2 milliseconds. Milliseconds, that would be insane. No, 0.2 seconds difference. But it really was an audible difference there, and it was better, for sure. Yeah. And this is then, for example, something I see from regular rooms sometimes, where you see it's just, in general, it's just too reverberant. So, starting from the bass is not that critical, to be honest, but especially above 100, there is just a lot of stuff going on. And these things can easily be treated with some broadband absorption, like you see here. Just nice panels, can be, foam, can of course be mineral wool or stone wool stuff. Just make sure that it's always well covered. There are also some really good materials that are more, environmentally friendly, I would call it. So this is, you can just check that. If you Google it, I will not mention anyone now because there are a few of them. Of course, they are competitors, and I really like most of them because it's just always great to have these options and to have these design options as well. But trust me, treatment is a cool thing. So if you can afford some, and if it's possible for you to change your room to some amounts, except losing your partner in crime who's living with you, then just do it. This is an example. I found out someone treated the room, but not the bass. So you can clearly see that above 100, this is well done. So just to compare that, it's way better than here. But of course, the bass is, this looks like a huge problem. And I think it's larger room. And here, of course, bass traps are heavily needed, how I put it. Bass traps are usually then placed in the corners of the room, somehow where you have, the highest energy. Or if you just walk around, you know that yourself, that if you go to the corner, there's almost the most boomy bass. And something like that, it's well controlled already. I only see actually, for example, this 70 hertz thing. And if someone would really be very, professional and critical, he could think about having a tuned bass trap. A tuned bass trap is somehow optimized for a specific frequency. It just adds a membrane that is dampened, and the way the membrane is constructed and somehow the complete design defines where this bass trap then is most effective. And for example, there are some manufacturers, they offer stuff for 70, for 60, for 80, for 90 hertz. And in that case, then I would recommend checking something that just is doing 70, because this is exactly what's happening here. Yeah, the second one that is shown here is not really that critical. Yeah, and then to make you jealous, this is what's possible, if a studio is designed very well, and if speakers are built into the wall. Actually, this pair of 51Bs is built into the wall using our flush mount kits. And what's so incredible here is that you already see, of course, there are still some ups and downs here, but if you look at the bass range, which is usually the most critical part, even before calibration, you see we have something like +4 dB. I think you remember my room, it was +20. And this, of course, shows this is very well done. Yeah, and then you only need really a small amount of filtering, and you are done. This is also visible that here we have these peaks and notches. This is always before calibration. This is important to mention. And you see that the maximum is there, +4. So when I received that, I thought, okay, nothing that much to say from my side. It's acceptable. And once again, this critical example, and then his example. So this is also very well done. Of course, there is a very small thing, but although to be honest, I'm not really sure. This for me also looks like that this is just a processing thing. So this is an old report, and I only have these screenshots, and we optimized it slightly. You can also see this black one here on the right side, which of course is not, 20 kilohertz are not ringing in that room. This is only a way how noise was somehow interpreted by the algorithm. And this is his early versus late. So once again, my example without editing, and then something like he did. And this is, for example, what's incredible. Usually, to be honest, at around 100, it's already on the same level for most rooms. And at 100, he has 20 dBs lower from the room sound. So this is, some people might think that this is already too dry. This is also sometimes a discussion with under sound engineers, what makes a room then too dry to just get a good feeling. And the last thing I would like to mention is just early reflections can, of course, also be seen. And it's really nice to somehow use the grade report to find out, okay, what's causing this early reflection. On this left example, there's one that is above -10. So usually you say if it's below -10, it's already acceptable because it's not causing really issues with comp filtering. But for example, if I would like to find out what is causing the one here, then it's listed here, and you see the time in distance is approximately 1 meter. And then you usually just have to think a little bit, what could be the path of sound. So the difference, between the path of sound between speakers to you and then speaker reflection to your ear is 1 meter for that thing. And on the right side, once again, this is from our fabulous stereo room. Well, there's nothing to discuss here. The only thing that is marked here is already at -15. So perfect. I would just have now a short block, although we already have 1 hour, but I hope that's fine for you. I'll just continue for a few minutes. Because a lot of people always ask me, what's the correct crossover frequency between subwoofers and speakers? And actually, there is no clear answer for that. You need to think about it. This is also why we are not doing some automatic adjustments at the moment. But hopefully I can show you how to approach that. First of all, I always would start with the sub. So just calibrate and measure the sub as long as you can and just move it until you get a really good result so that it's flat after calibration. For example, this one I would be very happy with. This is the green curve really at around 15 hertz. This is a huge one. Up to over 100, it's just completely flat. Forget about this really small thing here. And believe me, usually if you just have the subwoofer close to the wall on the floor and then move it slightly to the left or to the right side between your speakers, usually you find a spot that works well. There's also the option, if you'd like to, you can turn the subwoofer around. so that the driver is facing the wall, and just make sure that you have approximately 10 centimeters distance then, so an air gap in between. And this sometimes also can make a difference because, of course, then the physical position of the driver changes, especially with larger subs that have, they have a depth of 40, 50, 60 centimeters already. And if you then turn it around, then the coupling to the room is different. And if you have something like that, I look at the responses from the speakers. And if a response from the speaker, this is now on the right side, looks like this, I can be very happy because I have almost all options. This speaker does not have notches in the bass range. It's perfectly linear. So it's absolutely up to me then. For example, if I would like to start with 85, this would be a good starting point. This is a larger speaker. It's a 51B, and you see it plays down in that room to 30 hertz perfectly. You can also go for 70 or 60 hertz. And this is just a little different in the feeling, that the lower you get and the lower you go with the crossover, the less easy it is to localize the sub at all. So it really just feels part of the complete system. And the downside is if your speaker, for example, is limited already at 50, 40, then of course it makes a difference if the subwoofer takes over a critical part and just somehow helps the speaker to get more resolution. Because as you can imagine, think about an 8330, which is 5-inch, and you help an 8330 with an 7350. Then this small membrane, of course, has just more resolution, and you will just get really better headroom as well. So if you play louder, for example, and the speaker is the limiting factor, go higher with the crossover. Yeah, if in a rare case the subwoofer is the limiting factor because your subwoofer is too small, sometimes you don't trust us when we tell you that you need a larger subwoofer, then you can of course also go lower to help the subwoofer. But usually it's the other way around. And this is also just that to mention, if we recommend subwoofer sizes, it's usually we try to match the the SPL capabilities of the speaker. So for example, a 41 has a maximum SPL, and then we look, this is then 7360. If someone tells me, hey, I'm listening at lower volumes, I never go above, for example, 100 or 90, which is already loud in the living room, then it's no problem to use a smaller subwoofer. It's no problem at all. The only critical thing is if you want to do multi-channel audio with bass management, so you have a lot of channels that are bass managed, then you should make sure that the subwoofer is large enough or that you use 2 of them. So, but of course, reality usually is not that beautiful. So this is a more realistic thing for a speaker. I see something like that. So this speaker now has a problem at around 40 hertz. It's a relatively deep notch. Then it's pretty easy to reply, go higher. So for example, use 50 or 60 hertz. And of course, higher if you like to. And then this is completely covered. But this can be a problem solver. Let's say you can just not place your speakers in a better way, and this is just how it looks like. Think about a sub, and you can easily sort this out. And this is even more critical because now we are in the range I spoke about, this insane 90, 100, 120 hertz stuff. Really problematic. Can be seen quite often, for example, in surround channels because the angle to the floor is then a little more complex. And in that case, of course, I would go as high as I can. So really, I would go for 120, I guess, or 110, just to make sure that this is also covered. And this is why I was happy that now I have 120 instead of only 100, because it can help in some cases. And some of you ask from time to time, why don't you show the complete frequency response? So system frequency response, subwoofer and speakers. And we hear you, and I shared that with R&D, and let's see what we can do about it. At the moment, it's indeed only possible, for example, to use something like Room EQ Wizard generated sweep, and then you can do that. This is, for example, a 7360 with an 8341. And but for evaluating stuff, believe me, having everything separated is even easier and even better. because you can clearly see, for example, is it already falling down here? Or for example, what's happening in that range exactly? So for evaluation, I prefer that we have it separately. And actually, we already have two models who show that in this way. This is everything that is doing AutoCal, so W371, of course, then with the one speakers, and our wonderful flagship monitor 8381. And this also sometimes causes confusion because people are so used to see, the curves like green, blue, red, and we only show you the resulting one here. Yeah, this is a little hard. If you want to dig deeper into it, the answer, generate a grade report. Then you can see it also for these systems. And that red and green become visible here is only the reason when I apply a sound character profiler. This also was one question I got sometimes. So here I got this traditional, Schechter roll-off by 2 dBs from 100 Hertz. And then you see these two curves. Great. I would cover one more topic. Then I think let me just see how many is left. Oh, that's okay. It's okay. Listening level calibration. This is also something that is misunderstood in a lot of cases. First of all, I always put it like this, don't get me wrong. If you never have seen a loudness meter like the one you see here on the right side, so which shows you something like a long-term value, a short-term value of LUFS, loudness units, then you don't need the feature, listening level calibration, because actually it's made for people working with loudness metering. And usually this is done in the broadcast to ensure that you have the same loudness. So I think most of you know there's a huge difference in the perceived loudness. For example, if someone is reading out the news on the TV and then advertisements. Yeah, it's better now because they made it possible that they align it according to loudness standards. But in the past or on YouTube, it sometimes still happens. You're watching something, then out of the blue, it's bursting you away. And but the peaks are the same. So the peak levels of audio can be completely the same. It's just the dynamics, density, the mastering, and therefore they introduced that one. And when you do that, so if you click on listening level calibration, you will hear a noise from one speaker. This noise is recorded by the microphone, and we just adjust the level then. And this noise looks like this. So this is also important to understand. This noise, for example, does not contain any bass and also not really high frequencies. This is just a bandpass filtered noise because this is exactly the range you define this standard with. And after this calibration, you see dBSPL written on your beautiful metering here. And one of these standards, for example, is just defining, we have minus 23 LUFS, and then you get a defined listening level. For example, 73 dBSPL. The critical thing is this noise is generated in our speakers. So this is an absolute value coming from the speaker. Your complete audio chain is not included. So we don't know, for example, if your main output of your analog interface is minus 10, minus 15, minus 20. We don't know anything about it. Yeah? And therefore, a lot of people think, for example, they adjust this to 73 dBs, for example, and then they think if they play music, it should be 73 dB, looking at the microphone level. And usually it's not. And this is exactly what's happening, because this only works with digital sources and the digital output of an interface, because this has a defined maximum level. And then it also only displays the correct value if you have material. So for example, if you watch the news and your local broadcaster is using, for example, in Germany, it's indeed minus 23 for just spoken word, then you will be exactly at that range. Otherwise, you are not. So anyone who is interested in just how loud do I listen to music, which is really good to know, I can tell you, just use this wonderful, nice metering we show on top of everything. This is way easier. Place the microphone close to where you are sitting and look there. With the 9320, you have the fantastic option that you can change the weighting, because you might know that the weighting has a huge influence on how, for example, how big these numbers become, and the weighting just means that bass frequencies are treated in a different way. So, for example, A weighting reduces the influences of bass frequencies to a really high amount. So, for example, yesterday I was at a concert. It was really bass heavy. And if I use dB A weighting with my fantastic smartphone app, which is not a professional one, but they're pretty okay. And then I was, for example, at around 100 dB, already pretty loud. And when I switched to dBc, I was at 110 or even higher, just because it was so bass heavy. Because as you can see here with the the red curve, dBc, it's still not completely has the bass on the same level, but it's definitely it's more in the boat, I would say. And it's always interesting why people use A weighting. A weighting is really sometimes about some types of noise. If you're in a restaurant or stuff, then it makes sense. But being at a concert and then telling people, hey, we had not been higher than we had not been higher than 100 dBA, and not talking about the bass, which of course affects our hearing. This is ridiculous. And yesterday, if you take this serious, and if I would just have calculated how long could I have been there? So I already had, of course, earplugs in my ears. But how long could I have been there? Actually, I don't know, not even 15 minutes. Then you reach the limit where it gets dangerous for your hearing. So I don't know. So with the 9320, just use this function, click on the settings, and then you can have Z is unweighted. This is exactly what you get with, for example, the regular GLM kit. A, bass is heavily reduced, and C, usually, is the setting you use for music if it's a little louder. And don't be frustrated if you only have the GLM kit. Get used to Z. Just don't be shocked. For example, it might be that you see 90 and you're listening to EDM tracks, and of course it would be with a traditional C measurement would be 10 dBs lower. So this is usually the thing that happens. And mentioned almost 70 minutes ago, here you can enable ISS with GLM. In case you did not know that, this is not new for 5.2. We already have that for some time. And then you have to accept that the moment this dialog box. So the speakers are then switched off. And compared to the real ISS, where it would just wake up when you start playing something, here you have to click on this small button. It's reported that some of you are not happy with it. Let's see. Perfect. And this was some kind of a roller coaster, I think, hopefully with a few things that had been interesting for you. You already know that one, support@genelec.com. This is where you can reach us. And I said also from GLM, if you click on Services Help, and then you can also attach your file. You can also attach your grade reports if you like to. You can also just tell me that I should look into it. I have access to all of them. That's the good thing. So, And now I think it's time for some Q&A, if you are still with me. And I will just, go here. Perfect. So, actually, I have some people. Greetings from Argentina. Thank you. And then I have a hello and a yes. Yeah. No questions. That's interesting. Two options. It was just interesting enough that you thought, okay, he's just answering questions. So I think hopefully he will reach mine. Or it was you already knew everything. But hey, that's not a problem. I was too long. You don't ask questions. So perfect deal. So I would just say, then if there are questions later on, just let me know, and you can still, of course, type them in. The complete session will also be there on YouTube soon. Usually, it's just happening within a few hours, and then it's already there, and you can just start commenting again. Otherwise, thank you so much. Enjoy the summer. And yeah, see you soon in a webinar next to you. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye bye.